So I was listening to Jeff Kripal, The Art of Instituting Science or Technology. I can never remember the name of that. But that's where I first saw him. And I just recently saw an interview. I think they did a series of interviews on a channel called Jonathan, spelled by. People below the video that I was watching were joking about that. People who were saying that they were gay and that they they thought the guy was bi. Kind of, joking on wordplay or whatnot. But it obviously drew up a number of viewers from the gay community because it was talking about the intentionally inwritten homoeroticism that is found in the works of the Bible. That many people start to say, "Oh, that's blasphemous," or "That's terrible," and they look at people like Iman Hillman and call them heretic and so forth. But they walk away hypocrites, doing things in secret themselves, or causing a lot of problems in society for their own family members. And it's talking about what Ross Coulthart. Little news came out today about that, and this is more gossip. But I try to stay away from this. But that's today, that on the 30th of June, 2026. That happy birthday, Colin. That Iman Hillman and many other people have spoken about this. Gotten a lot of backlash. And I'm surprised that Michael Screw never really got into this, but I know that he, before he passed away, understood this. He probably did mention this when he was talking about Herman Melville and Moby Dick and all the underlying homoerotic themes that, not underlying, like blatant in your face, literally. From cleaning the ship to the interaction between characters and so forth. And there's undeniable, like to look at the Bible as the multi-tiered, multi-principle, and anti-principle instruction manual that is slowly hinting at developing oneself in totality and realizing that these spheres of disparate separation don't actually exist. Like, why limit your sense experience and sense pleasure experience to certain aspects of your body, number one, and to say that you're homosexual because you're experiencing something in and of yourself, and that through imagination, this suggestion of imposing an interaction is heavily swayed and being reappropriated constantly through Edward Bernays symbolism and all the other things that are going on, teaching methods and assumed roles, social roles and behavior. And the mere discussion of it shows a complete lack of maturity on the part of most people, right? And then you don't have to look far to realize that this is why society is so fucked. This is why society remains so mature. This is why society exists. It exists to maintain a false bravado of to keep. But you can take this on, and when we talk about Jake Barber, Lou Elizondo, right, David Grush, I think all these people are psyop, shills, if you will, goalies. I think it's pretty obvious for most people that have been watching this, but to say that the whole thing that came out about a year and a half ago, where it was being broadly discussed that these people with PK abilities, and I wrote a little something on that recently, but you can't not mention Jeff Lee Mishlove, New Thinking Aloud, and his interviews, involvement, specifically with Ted Owens, the PK man, right? So you have Gerard. Many people have written around the inner dynamics of and the interplay of energetics in a localized field response that is, from our human perspective, energizing certain nervous system pathways that add to specific glandular excretions and promote a specific stewing outcome of through the HPTA and other sensory input to actually transform the individual into a specific causal set. Now that's very wordage, just to use the simple term patterning, but that one would have to deem themselves homosexual, would have to become one thing in society to themselves and everyone else, and couldn't thereby say that I'm also, like, I'm a Democrat and I'm a conservative in equal balance, right? So we get into spheres of thought where we begin to see that this disparate measure is a cleaving away and an absence of intellect, and that what we should be doing is we should be embracing purity, right, in principle adherence, and then realizing those deviations away from purity also exist in the human experience, and how to either develop those or those areas of us, or to see that these are sabotaging agents, and that we live sort of in this inverted universe that's forcing people into certain notional cavities or aspects of human behavior that marginalize them on psychosomatic, psychosexual level, Freudian sort of level, but also that they are then seen and regarded in such a way from the liminal, where you now see the ongoing integration and processing of this newfound identity, or this emergent identity, as their only identity, right? And I do see the homoeroticism, but I also see many other layers of what Jesus or the disciples or what these books represent. The ones that have been left in, the ones that have been modified slightly or taken out, the canons that have been taken out, the ones that were being debated by the Council of Nicaea, Constantine, right? And all the areas of evolution and really de-evolution of reporting these cults, because when you're looking at Mithraism, you're looking at Dionysianism, you're looking further into Prometheanism, Pythagoreanism, you start to see how these various schools of thought really are carrying on this occulted torch, but it's not occulted in the sense that you're not supposed to see it. It's that you will be aware of these principles or anti-principle elements when the time is ready, or when you have gained in maturation or been attacked from through these spiritual mechanisms, to where you never would have had such a thought, but the thought was imposed on you, or in many instances, a grooming by people in this world physically, but also cotangently happening by spiritual forces that could be considered disincarnate, but also are sort of aided along by what I would consider or call surfers, people that really get into. I don't agree with Jeffrey Kripal at all. In fact, I find him to be. I'm surprised that such a person of such an age is in denial of his sexuality. I think that he full well not only flirts with it but enjoys. I think that he's a deviant personally. I don't think he's using it responsibly. But I do think that his conversation is warranted. But I think it's coming out in an inappropriate sort of way, and that is that in the breadth and in the depth of the situation, that's not the problem. It's the fact that these principles and the contrarian aspects to them also need to be considered in full development. That once you get away from terms and labels, you look at the fact that there are multiple spheres that encompass the individual, multiple layers, and that all of these layers are supposed to be developed, right, fully, or at least understood, and that this is how we go into the energetics of human depth. I'm not telling people to become homophobic. I'm not telling them to be afraid of anything. I also think it's just as equally as dangerous to become overly comfortable with the notional idea that's been sold to you as a product, as a brand, and not discover this within yourself, right? That's the real crime here, is that you will be told, oh, this is what you are, and this is how far it goes in the depth that this title entails, or what's, as a package deal. And then decades later, all that package deal has changed, right? You're no longer relevant. So it comes back to know thyself, right? And the fact that we're no longer expected to live within these narrow gauge parameters, but you may not have a job. We're not expected to be always stepping on eggshells, but the fact that all those eggshells are over there and there's even glass and it's the only place that you're allowed to roam, well, you put yourself there, right? So this PC, politically correct mechanism, is more at play than ever. You see it on ChatGPT, you see it on Gemini, you see it on Claude or whatever the fuck else is being used there, right? I use Gemini, but I'm very disappointed in it. And I don't. Ben Gortzall gets into this a little bit. And I think, like this discussion, when I'm talking about Jeffrey Kripal and others, right, that I've mentioned, that really not only, and you can't not talk about Michel Foucault and his interpretation of his synthesis of Nietzsche. You can't not talk about that. You can't not talk about Alan Turing being gay and the Turing machine and how influential that was, and the interplay with Konrad Zuse and the whole idea of cybernetics, but mainly computational systems, and the fact that the universe is a computational system, and where that comes from, right? It's very Gnostic, very ancient, but there's the whole point here is there's a love and there's a light that's very reminiscent of Zoroastrianism. Thus spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche, right? That proved, in my opinion, that Nietzsche wasn't all about master will, and he would have, I believe, come out with a magnum opus of work that went beyond will to power and stretched in much deeper into Heideggerian meaning, right? But then there are powers at play that keep this information from coming into the light, And then, of course, Husserl's relationship, close relationship with Heidegger, it got really weird there, as Heidegger went into, right? We won't get into that, but we actually worked together. And you almost want to break off like Burkhard Heim and start to look at things in dimensions of compartmentalization to really take Dasein and a lot of the other concepts that come from Heideggerian philosophy. And some consider Heidegger to be the only philosopher that you ever require. Like that, if you get into, you understand, and you read Heidegger, you've read Leibniz, you've taken a shot at Schopenhauer, you understand the interplays and the mechanics when you begin to look at Kierkegaard and Spinoza and David Hume and many others, because you start to see the actionable probity or the principles in play in movement. Like this is how it works, And I urge people to look down at my playlist, because I've got a huge playlist of many developmental enlightening videos that really, I think we live in a time that's way beyond enlightenment. I think enlightenment kind of inferred that, maybe these different spheres can work simultaneously and there are multiple layers to us. But we live in a time where we're being asked, you're not activated yet, right? You're not aware that you can develop and take up all these titles and then realize that, how can I be one thing when I'm entirely the antithesis of that at the same time? But then I'm a third, right? So we start getting into kind of like thermodynamics, Roth's fourth proposed law, where you see that these items of equilibrium from entropy that lead from one form of equilibrium into another can be at play, and that once you understand this, you become the life source, the life form of the resonant power of these energetics.